Hi, so this is for discussion number 12. For the first question, in thinking about what I think I could do to prepare myself spiritually as a care provider, if I was working with Mr. and Mrs. Wright, to provide for their needs as she's facing a life-threatening illness. Firstly, in talking about Newen's story about his near-death experience, what stood out to me is what he remembered most about his medical experience and about his providers was how caring they were. And I don't think they really sugarcoated things for him. They did what they had to do and they were honest with him, but they described what they were doing and why they were doing it, why he was given certain medications or needed certain procedures, and what he would experience when they were doing certain things and what kind of pain he could experience. So they were honest with him, but they were caring. And I think that's something that I could use if I was working with Mr. and Mrs. Wright to prepare myself for working with them, would be to be honest with them about what they're going through and what could happen and what they could experience, but to be caring in the way that I provide for them. Moving on to Riemann's stories this week, I decided to talk about the story, The Gift of the Magi. And in this story, Rachel's mom was really sick and she was on several pills that were very complex and had to be taken at certain times. And this worried Rachel, especially since her mom, she said she could be absent-minded and it could be easy for her to accidentally forget to take a pill or to accidentally take 2 pills, which could have a catastrophic result. And she moved her mother out there to live with her, and she was very insistent. Mom, you have to take this pill. Remember to take half of this pill. Don't take 2 of these. Take 2 of these now. And her mom said to her, I will die when it's my time, not a second before and not a second after. And she said to Rachel that pills won't outsmart God, that when God's ready for her, he'll take her. And I think that's something that we can bring to working with our patients, such as Mrs. Wright, that death is more than just a biological process, that it's more than just a cause of, the physical demise of a person's body, but that they might have a certain time and for them to die, and that it'll happen when it happens. And I think that's something that if we have in mind for our patients, that we would be able to better care for them, especially in a spiritual sense. I also wanted to talk about Rachel's story called Restoring the World. And in this story, she talks about how every human participates in restoring the holiness of the world. And I think especially us being members of a field that is very service-oriented, and we are really here to serve our patients and their families and to serve people, that we are to look for the little sparks of holiness in our patients and the people we interact with. And she said that the way that we restore the holiness of the world is through loving kindness and compassion. And I think that's something that's very important to bring in to cases like Mrs. Wright is, to show lovingness and kindness and compassion that can make a whole world of difference in their care. Moving on to this song by David Wilcox, the phrase that I was most impacted by in this song was the phrase, where you're healed is where you're broken. And what I took from that is, especially when someone is facing a life-threatening illness, where you're healed spiritually is where you're also broken. You don't have to feel like you have to hold yourself together. It's okay to not be perfect, and especially in this song being a Christian song, that it's okay to be broken because God is there to provide for you and to heal you. Talking about the interview about final gifts, the lady who was interviewed, Callahan, she mentioned that with the rise of the medical industry, that death and dying was sterilized. So it had become very much a medical process and a biological process, and something that was just very cold, it sounds like. And I think that's something that when we're working with patients who are facing death potentially, is to not make it a cold and sterile experience that the providers are hiding behind barriers of gowns and masks, but to make sure that it is a spiritual experience for our patients, that we're not just there to see if the body continues to live or not. And I think that's a goal that I would want to have when working with patients who are facing something like this, is to make sure that I'm not coming across as a cold medical professional. I'm moving on to the second question of ways that I could serve accompanying the rites if I was on their care team, particularly if they were seeking forgiveness, completion, celebration, or other final gifts. This reminded me of a story from this week's reading in Reeman's book called Forgiveness. And this was a story about Edward and Cynthia. Edward had AIDS, and he felt like he needed forgiveness for the nature of his disease from his parents, or maybe not forgiveness, but acceptance and peace. And Cynthia had promised Edward that she would be there when he died, and she wasn't able to do that, and felt like she was haunted by them. So in something like this, I would want to show love and build a relationship with someone who is going through something like that. And Rachel said that death can be a form of service. The state of consciousness in which we die may heal some great rift between matter and spirit. This may be so, but certainly the way people die often serves those who live on, offering us the opportunity to know the importance of our love and the blessings of our relationship, no matter how short our time together has been. And I think that's something that was very impactful. And so I would want to be able to build a relationship with my patients, because it could affect them no matter how long our relationship was. And finally, for the third question, thinking about how what we learned this week I could use to prepare to accompany others facing significant losses. What I got most for this question was from Riemann also. And in excuse me, her story, Emperor's New Clothes, she mentions that spiritual growth does not remove loss. It does not change life, but it changes suffering. And I think that's something that would be important to bring up with someone facing a significant loss, is that we want to help them and show them love, and to help them meet their spiritual needs. But that's not going to change the fact that they suffered a significant loss, but it can ease their suffering. Thanks.